Venus had the kind of tropical charm that rich idiots put on postcards, minus the promise of a decent cocktail. The humidity could choke a cyborg, and the smell of sulfur did wonders for your sinuses, provided you didn't need them. Dr. Thalassa Corin, lead scientist and semi-professional cynic, stared into the holographic readout in her lab like it had personally insulted her, which, in a way, it had. "That damn signal again," she muttered, flicking away a mosquito the size of a small rodent. At least the mosquitoes had the decency to be predictable, annoying, blood-sucking, but predictable, unlike the signal, which danced on the edge of detectability, taunting her with its inconsistency. Her assistant, Barrow, loitered nearby, trying to look busy lest Thalassa decided he wasn't. "Maybe it's just space junk," he suggested, not for the first time and definitely not for the last. "Could be a rogue satellite, a broken toaster, or, I dunno, alien spam mail. If it's alien spam, they're bloody desperate for attention," Thalassa quipped, her fingers darting over the controls. "This isn't junk. It's got a pattern, a purpose. It's like it's calling out to someone." Or something. Barrow scratched his head, a gesture that had become a nervous tick around this particular topic. "So what are you thinking? E.T. sending a friend request? More like E.T. sending an eviction notice," Thalassa replied, her voice flat as a landing pad. "It's coming from deep space, and if my calculations are right, and they always are, it's heading straight for Earth." "Well, that's a cheerful thought for a Thursday," Barrow half-laughed, half-choked. "Should we tell someone, like, I dunno, the military or an exterminator?" Thalassa rolled her eyes, an exercise she could perform blindfolded at this point in her career. "And say what?" "Excuse me, General, but I think a hostile alien force might be coming to wipe us out. How's your schedule looking next week?" Barrow shrugged. "Better than getting vaporized and having my atoms scattered across the galaxy." Thalassa snorted. "Optimism suits you, Barrow. Use it sparingly. Let's keep monitoring. If this signal changes, we'll know something's up. For now, we keep it under wraps." As if on cue, the lab's main console blinked ominously. Thalassa and Barrow exchanged a glance, the kind you share with someone when you both realize the airlock just sealed and the oxygen's on the fritz. "Well, shit," Barrow said, unnecessarily summarizing the situation. The display showed a cascade of data, numbers and symbols racing like they had somewhere far more important to be. But what caught Thalassa's attention was the waveform, a perfect sine wave that seemed to pulse with a rhythm all its own. "That's new," Thalassa murmured, leaning closer, as if proximity would translate into clarity. "And by new you mean terrifying, right?" Barrow asked, crossing his arms like it was an anti-anxiety technique. Thalassa nodded, her mind racing through possibilities like a hyperdrive out of control. "It's a countdown," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Barrow laughed, a short bark of disbelief. "A countdown to what? The end of the world? That's just great, Thalassa. Can't wait to put that on my calendar." "A countdown to contact," Thalassa corrected, a chill settling over her that had nothing to do with Venus's climate control. "And we need to figure out when and where before it's too late." "Before what's too late?" Barrow asked, his usual bravado faltering. "What are they gonna do, invade?" "That's the optimistic scenario," Thalassa replied, her face grim. "Worst case, they're not coming for a friendly chat. We could be looking at an extermination event." Barrow opened his mouth, closed it again. Words seemed woefully inadequate. "Right," he finally said, his voice hollow. "So, who do we call first?" Thalassa pondered, running through the meager list of allies, resources, and people who wouldn't laugh her out of the solar system. "Start with the UN. They've got more red tape than sense, but they'll listen if we get loud enough. And then we prepare for the worst being alien apocalypse," Barrow asked, trying for humor but landing somewhere near hysteria. "The worst," Thalassa confirmed, "being we're not the top dogs in this universe after all. And they're about to let us know." The lab fell silent, the only sound the soft hum of machinery and the distant cries of Venusian wildlife, creatures blissfully ignorant of their potential doom. Thalassa took a deep breath, exhaled slowly. She'd faced down bureaucrats, academic rivals, and once an overly aggressive vending machine. But this was something else. "Let's get to work," she said, a steely determination in her voice that brooked no argument. Barrow nodded, the bravado returning to his posture if not his eyes. "At least we're not bored, right?" Thalassa chuckled darkly. "Yeah, Barrow, nothing like impending annihilation to keep you on your toes." They set to work, the weight of their task pressing heavily on their shoulders. Somewhere out in the vastness of space, something ancient and powerful was stirring, and it was coming for them. In the grand scheme of things, Venus was a backwater, a sideshow on the cosmic stage, but for now it was the front line in humanity's greatest struggle, whether anyone else knew it or not. "Barrow," Thalassa said, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a laser scalpel, "get the data ready. We need to make contact with Earth's defense coordinators." "You think they'll believe us?" Barrow asked, sorting through the data with fingers that shook ever so slightly. "If they don't, they might not have the chance to regret it," Thalassa said, her tone grim. Let's make sure they do. As they worked in silence, the tension was palpable, like a storm cloud looming just over the horizon. Venus might have been terraformed for comfort, but there was nothing comfortable about the situation they found themselves in. You know, Barrow said after a while, the strain of silence becoming too much. I always thought if aliens ever showed up, they'd be little green men with weird ray guns. Thalassa smirked. And I always thought I'd be spending my time arguing with idiots in academia, not preparing for an alien invasion. Life's full of surprises, Barrow said, his tone somewhere between sarcastic and terrified. Isn't it just? Thalassa replied, checking over the data for the umpteenth time. But hey, if we pull this off, we'll be heroes. Metal-worthy even. Yes, if there's anyone left to hand them out, Barrow muttered, though there was a glimmer of hope in his voice, however fleeting. They worked through the night, their task a race against a clock they couldn't see and didn't understand. The universe had always been a vast, uncaring void, a place of cold equations and unforgiving distances. But now, it seemed, it had taken notice of the tiny blue planet spinning in its depths, and what it intended to do about that was a question that loomed as large as the cosmos itself, a question that only time, and perhaps a bit of luck, would answer. As the artificial dawn lit the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the Venusian landscape, Thalassa leaned back in her chair, exhaustion and determination etched into her features. We've done all we can for now, she said, her voice a weary whisper. Let's hope it's enough. Barrow nodded, his expression a mix of relief and dread. If not, there's always that alien spam mail to respond to. Thalassa laughed, a sound that was equal parts humor and resignation. Yeah, Barrow, let's keep that as plan B. The laughter faded, leaving only the soft whir of the lab's equipment and the distant call of unknown creatures prowling the Venusian jungles. As they stared out into the alien dawn, a single thought hung heavy in the air. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together, and they'd find out if humanity was ready to make its stand against the cosmic unknown, or failing that, they'd at least go down with a good story to tell. Thalassa Corin leaned back in her chair, the rhythmic clatter of the lab's equipment a familiar, if uncomforting, lullaby. The holographic readout continued its silent dance, spitting out numbers that promised doom but offered no solutions. She sipped her coffee, more sludge than liquid, but comforting nonetheless. Comfort being relative, of course. Sleep is for the dead, right? Barrow piped up from behind a stack of data printouts, his face pale in the artificial light. He looked as if he'd been up all night, because he had. The bags under his eyes were almost big enough to pack for a weekend trip. Sleep's overrated, Thalassa replied, taking another heroic gulp of her coffee. Like good government or ethical corporations, the signal, that damned signal, had started doing something peculiar. Peculiar in a guess what, the universe hates you kind of way. It was affecting the local wildlife, making the already inhospitable Venusian ecosystem even more of a death trap. Check this out, Barrow said, pointing to a live feed from one of their field drones. The screen showed a swarm of Venusian dragonflies, each one big enough to carry off a small child, buzzing erratically, like a bunch of drunks looking for their way home after last call. Looks like they're doing the cha-cha, Thalassa remarked, her voice laced with a sarcasm that could cut glass. Great, as if they weren't annoying enough, Barrow nodded. The signal's messing with them. Maybe it's resonating with something in their biology, or maybe they just hate it as much as we do, Thalassa said. Either way, it's not just the bugs. Check the fauna readings. The data didn't paint a pretty picture. Across the planet, everything with more than 3 limbs, or scales, or feathers, or whatever passed for skin on Venus was acting up. The local fauna were going berserk, noisy, angry, and unpredictable, which, come to think of it, was a pretty good description of the average day in Thalassa's lab. It's like they're getting instructions from the signal, Barrow said, disbelief clear in his tone. Like someone's flipping switches in their tiny brains. Wouldn't be the first time a signal did that, Thalassa noted dryly. Remember that time an advertising jingle caused mass hysteria back on Earth? Same principle, less catchy tune. This is different, Barrow insisted, rubbing the back of his neck with a nervous hand. And if it's happening here, what about Earth? Thalassa frowned, her fingers drumming a rapid tattoo on the console. If it's reaching Earth, things are going to get messy fast. Messy like a paper jam or messy like total societal collapse? Barrow asked, raising an eyebrow. Somewhere in between, Thalassa replied. Maybe closer to the collapse. If the signal's affecting communications, it could destabilize systems worldwide. Chaos, panic, kittens and dogs living together. You know, the usual. Barrow swallowed hard. We should check Earth's communication networks, see if they're having issues. Get on it, Thalassa instructed. And while you're at it, check our emergency contact protocols. We need to make sure we're heard, even if the signal's causing static. As Barrow busied himself with the task, Thalassa turned her attention back to the lab's main console. The data was relentless, more lines of code than sense, though a pattern was emerging, a pattern she didn't like one bit. It wasn't just random noise, it was deliberate, targeted chaos. Got something, Barrow called, his voice cutting through the ambient whir of machinery. Reports coming in. Networks are going down across major cities. Internet outages, satellite blackouts, and the occasional confession of undying love mistakenly broadcast on live television. Internet outages, Thalos amused. At least there's one silver lining. Less social media panic to deal with. Yes, but more actual panic, Barrow countered. It's a trade-off, the worst kind. The realization hit Thalassa like a cold wave. The signal's more than just a countdown, it's attacking, softening the defenses before whatever comes next. Guess we'll be lucky if all they do is hack our Netflix accounts, Barrow said, attempting levity and failing spectacularly. Or they could crash our whole infrastructure, Thalassa muttered, more to herself than to Barrow. This isn't just a signal, it's a weapon. Barrow's eyes widened, the weight of the revelation settling in. What do we do? Run, hide, or start praying? First, we inform whoever's left in charge on Earth who's got more than 2 brain cells to rub together, Thalassa said, her tone edged with urgency. Then we prepare for the impact, because from the looks of it we're in the bullseye. As if on cue, the lab's lighting flickered, a power fluctuation rippling through the facility. Thalassa cursed under her breath, slamming her fist on the console in frustration. Venus isn't exactly known for its stability, she grumbled, trying to reboot the systems. But this is ridiculous. You think there's any chance this is all just a big cosmic prank? Barrow asked, his voice tinged with a desperate hope. If it is, the joke's on us, Thalassa replied. And it's not funny. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows, giving the lab a ghostly ambience. Outside, the chaotic screech of disturbed wildlife underscored the mounting tension. It was as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Keep monitoring, Thalassa instructed, her fingers dancing over the controls with a frenetic energy born of necessity. And keep trying those emergency channels. We need to get through to the UN or whoever's left of it. Barrow nodded, focusing on his task with renewed determination. You think they'll listen? I think they'll have to, Thalassa said. Sooner or later, everyone's going to have to face the music. The question is, will we be ready when the band starts playing? As they worked in grim silence, the weight of their responsibility settled over them like a suffocating fog. It wasn't just about decoding a signal anymore. It was about survival, about making sure humanity had a fighting chance against whatever lay beyond the stars. Any word from the other labs? Barrow asked, breaking the heavy silence. Maybe someone else is picking up similar signals. Last I checked, we're the only show in town, Thalassa answered. But I'll see if anyone else is still broadcasting. A quick scan revealed nothing but static and silence from other outposts. It seemed Venus was alone in the universe, save for the two of them and the invisible menace lurking just out of reach. The calm before the storm, Thalassa muttered, her eyes fixed on the array of screens. Would have been nice if the universe sent us a memo first. Barrow attempted a weak smile. Guess we'll just have to make do. Like always, Thalassa nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. They were racing against an unknown clock, each second ticking away like a countdown to oblivion, and all they could do was hope their efforts weren't in vain. Maybe we'll get lucky, Barrow said, though his voice suggested he didn't believe it for a second. Lucky's never been our style, Thalassa replied. We'll just have to settle for prepared. With that, they continued their work, each keystroke a small act of defiance against the inevitable. Whether or not it would be enough, they'd soon find out. As the hours dragged on and the artificial day faded into an equally artificial night, Thalassa and Barrow remained vigilant. The signal pulsed with a life of its own, an ominous reminder of the threat that loomed over them all. Ever wonder why we do this? Barrow asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the chaos displayed before him. Because someone has to, Thalassa replied, and because the alternative is sitting on our hands and waiting for the end. Barrow nodded, the truth in her words settling in. Let's hope we didn't bite off more than we can chew. We always do, Thalassa said with a weary smile. It's what makes life interesting. And with that they worked on, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option, that somewhere out there in the vastness of space an answer awaited, and they'd either find it or fall trying. As the lab hummed with activity, the distant calls of Venus's wildlife echoed through the night, a reminder that they weren't alone. But whether that was a comfort or a curse, only time would tell. And time, as always, was in short supply. Keep your eyes open, Thalassa said, her voice firm and steady. We're not done yet, Barrow nodded, his resolve mirroring hers. Yeah, let's show those aliens what we're made of, Thalassa chuckled softly. That's the spirit, Barrow. Now let's hope it's enough to save our skins. And with those words, they threw themselves back into the work, the fate of their world hanging in the balance. But in the quiet of the lab, amidst the uncertainty and dread, there was also hope. Hope that in the end, humanity would endure. Because in the grand scheme of things, giving up wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. The lab was a circus of chaos, screens flickering like a dodgy carnival ride, and the data streams were more tangled than a politician's alibi. Dr. Thalassa Corin, reigning queen of sarcasm and science in equal measure, was about a hair's breadth from throwing a tantrum. If the signal wasn't enough to make her want to pull her hair out, Barrow's incessant typing might do the trick. Any chance you can type quieter? Thalassa snapped, her fingers drumming the console with the kind of rage that only a scientist suffering from caffeine withdrawal could muster. Barrow shot her a look that suggested he was about to suggest something anatomically impossible, but wisely held his tongue. Sorry, didn't realize I was in a library. I'll keep it down, Your Majesty. Nice save, Thalassa muttered, her eyes glued to the holographic readout. The numbers were a mess, like the aftermath of a toddler's finger painting session. This signals like a bad rash. It's not going anywhere. Before she could dive deeper into the data nightmare, the lab doors hissed open, ushering in a new player to their little drama. Zephyr Yorin, enigmatic engineer extraordinaire, sauntered in with the swagger of someone who had cracked more mysteries than he'd had hot dinners. He was the kind of guy who'd wear sunglasses in a black hole just because he could. Well, if it isn't the brains of the operation, Zephyr drawled, nodding at Thalassa and Barrow. And here I thought I'd find you two having a tea party and discussing your feelings. Tea's cold and feelings are for the weak, Thalassa replied without missing a beat. What brings you crawling out of your hole, Zephyr? Zephyr smirked, leaning against a console like he owned the place. Heard you might need a hand with a little signal problem. Figured I'd grace you with my presence. Barrow arched an eyebrow. And what makes you think you can help where we can't? Simple. I'm just that good, Zephyr said, flashing a grin that could charm the pants off a nun. Plus, I've got a fresh pair of eyes. Yours look like they've seen better days. Thalassa sighed, her patience thinner than a politician's promise. All right, mister. Brilliant, what's your plan? Counter signal, Zephyr replied, tapping his temple like it was the holy grail of genius ideas. We send out a frequency to disrupt whatever mojo this alien signal's throwing around. Easier said than done, Barrow grumbled. The signal's more tangled than a spaghetti monster on crack, Zephyr chuckled. Good thing I like a challenge. With a shrug that screamed I'm too cool for this, Zephyr got to work. His fingers danced over the controls, a symphony of keystrokes that sounded like Mozart if Mozart had been a caffeine-fueled techie. Thalassa watched him, half intrigued, half skeptical. You really think you can outsmart them? Outsmart? Probably not, Zephyr admitted, his eyes never leaving the screens. But I can annoy the hell out of them. Sometimes that's enough. Annoyance as a defense mechanism, Barrow said, nodding. Reminds me of my ex. The three of them worked in a rhythm only chaos could orchestrate, their focus a fragile thing held together by spit and determination. Outside, Venus's atmosphere roared with life, the creatures still drunk on the alien signal symphony. And then the universe decided to up the ante. Earth was under siege, reports flooding in like cockroaches after lights out. Major cities were falling like dominoes, their once vibrant lights snuffed out one by one. Looks like the aliens aren't just playing footsie anymore, Zephyr noted, glancing at the incoming feeds. They're kicking the door down. Cities are going dark, Barrow said, his voice grim. It's like they're flipping the switch on civilization. Bet they left the bill on the door too, Thalassa quipped, though her heart wasn't quite in it. We need that counter signal, fast. I'm on it, Zephyr promised, his fingers a blur of motion. Just need a few more tweaks. As Zephyr worked his magic, Thalassa navigated the labyrinth of emergency protocols, trying to piece together the tatters of Earth's defenses. Communication was a patchwork of static and broken signals, a testament to the chaos raining down on their home planet. Any luck getting through to the UN? Barrow asked, his eyes flicking between screens like a gambler on a losing streak. Not unless you count dead air as a conversation, Thalassa replied, frustration coloring her words. It's like shouting into the void. Guess they finally got their wish and turned the volume down on humanity, Barrow said, attempting levity but falling short. Zephyr's hand stilled, a slow grin spreading across his face. All right, folks, time to see if this baby flies. He hit a button with the kind of finality reserved for movie villains launching superweapons. The lab's equipment hummed with new life, a countersignal surging into the ether with all the subtlety of a marching band. Think it'll work? Thalassa asked, her skepticism palpable. Best case, we piss off some aliens, Zephyr replied with a shrug. Worst case, well, there's always plan B, which is, Zephyr grinned. Run like hell, the countersignal spiraled out into the cosmos, a challenge thrown down in the face of an enemy that had yet to show its face. The holographic readouts shifted, a subtle change that suggested some impact, though whether it was enough remained to be seen. Outside, the wildlife's manic dance slowed, a ripple of confusion spreading through the ecosystem. It was a small victory, but in times of desperation, small victories were all they had. Well, that's something, Barrow said, nodding at the readouts. It's like we hit the snooze button on a cosmic alarm clock. But only for a moment, Thalassa added, her eyes narrowing. We need more than a temporary fix. As if to emphasize her point, the lab lights flickered again, a reminder that the storm was far from over. Power fluctuations are getting worse, Barrow noted, his voice laced with concern. We don't have much time. Then we make the most of it, Thalassa declared, her resolve hardening like concrete. We keep fighting no matter what. Zephyr nodded, his earlier bravado replaced by steely determination. Count me in. We're not done yet. Together they worked against the clock, a trio of unlikely heroes standing firm against an unseen foe. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the brink of oblivion. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was defying the odds. Think they'll give us a medal for this? Barrow wondered, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Only if we live long enough to collect it, Thalassa replied. Let's make sure that happens. The night dragged on, an interminable march of seconds that felt like eternity, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of their world hung in the balance. The signal was still out there, lurking like a predator in the dark, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But for now they fought, with grit, with science, and with a stubborn refusal to roll over and die. Because at the end of the day, when all was said and done, that was what it meant to be human. As the first light of an artificial dawn crept into the lab, Thalassa, Barrow, and Zephyr stood together, ready to face whatever came next. They were tired, they were battered, and they were far from done. Let's show these bastards what we're made of, Thalassa said, her voice a battle cry in the quiet of the lab. Barrow and Zephyr nodded, united in purpose, if not in spirit. Together they would fight, and together they would prevail. At least that was the plan. And plans, as they all knew, had a funny way of going awry. But that was a problem for another day. Right now they had a world to save, and time was of the essence. Ready when you are, Doc, Zephyr said, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. Then let's get to work, Thalassa replied, her determination a beacon in the darkness. And with that they returned to their battle, a three-person army against an unknown enemy, because in the end it wasn't the size of the fight that mattered, but the size of the fight in them, and they had fight to spare. Well, if this isn't just a delightful cluster of cosmic chaos, Thalassa muttered, glaring at the holographic readouts like they owed her money. The counter-signal was doing its best to annoy the aliens, but the numbers suggested they were barely scratching the surface. Zephyr was hunched over the console, pecking away like a caffeinated woodpecker. I'd say we're at least giving them a headache. Hope it's a migraine, Barrow added, squinting at his own screen like he was trying to see the future. Because if they get past this, we might need more than aspirin. Thalassa snorted. We might need a miracle or a new planet. Venus is nice this time of year, right? Assuming you don't mind the acid rain, Zephyr replied, smirking. And dragonflies the size of your average disaster movie. Those are a feature, not a bug, Barrow chimed in. Tourists love them. Yeah, tourists and the criminally insane, Thalassa said, tapping a console with enough force to suggest she was considering violence against inanimate objects. We're running out of time and Earth's running out of cities. As if on cue, a shrill alarm blared from one of the panels, loud enough to wake the dead, or at least make them wish they'd stayed asleep. Red lights flashed like a disco for the doomed, and the air filled with the kind of tension you could cut with a chainsaw. What now? Thalassa groaned, already dreading the answer. The lab was a dysfunctional circus, and she was the unwilling ringmaster. Looks like someone's trying to sabotage us from the inside, Barrow said, his fingers flying across the keys. Systems are going haywire. Great, Zephyr muttered, his eyes narrowing. Just what we needed, a little friendly backstabbing to spice things up. Thalassa's mind raced, piecing together the fragmented data. This signal's starting to feel like a bad houseguest. The kind that drinks all your beer and leaves the toilet seat up, or down, depending on your preference, Zephyr quipped, but his humor was tinged with urgency. Either way, we need to find out who's turned Judas before they sink the ship. Any bets on who it is? Barrow asked, though the humor was drained from his voice, replaced by a grim determination. Could be anyone, Thalassa replied, scanning the lab's chaotic mess, but my money's on someone who hasn't had a good night's sleep in weeks. That narrows it down to everyone, Zephyr pointed out, gesturing to the whole team. We're all running on fumes in desperation. The realization hit Thalassa like a rogue asteroid. The signal. What if it's not just screwing with the wildlife? Barrow's fingers paused mid-type. You think it's affecting us too? Wouldn't be the strangest thing to happen today, Thalassa said. And that's saying something, Zephyr nodded. Makes sense. We're knee-deep in the transmission wavelength. Who knows what it's doing to our brains? Well, damn, Barrow sighed. Never thought I'd have to worry about alien mind control on top of everything else. Welcome to the club, Zephyr said, turning back to his console. Membership includes paranoia and a stylish tinfoil hat. While they bantered, the lab systems continued to flicker and dance like a malfunctioning jukebox. Whoever was playing double agent had a flair for the dramatic. We need to isolate the signal, figure out how it's getting to us, Thalassa said, rubbing her temples as if trying to massage out the universe's cruelty. Zephyr tapped his temple, the universal gesture of "I've got a plan," and grinned. Why not use the counter signal? Amplify it, see if we can ping back and get a location on our inside trader. Barrow shrugged, looking impressed despite himself. That's not a terrible idea. Thanks, Zephyr said, pretending to preen. I have those occasionally. All right, let's do it, Thalassa said, her voice a sharp blade cutting through the chaos. No time to waste. With a flurry of keystrokes, they repurposed the counter signal, turning it into a spotlight aimed at rooting out their would-be saboteur. The lab systems hiccuped, screens flickering as the new signal pulsed through. The air was electric with anticipation, each second stretching like a rubber band about to snap, and then they found what they were looking for. Got you, Zephyr announced triumphantly, pointing to a blinking dot on one of the displays. Looks like our saboteurs hiding in Lab B. Figures, Thalassa said, her patience wearing thinner than a cheap spacesuit. Let's pay them a visit, Barrow hesitated. You think they'll come quietly, Thalassa shrugged. Probably not, but we're going anyway. Together, they stormed out of the lab, a ragtag trio on a mission to save their operation from both external threats and internal treachery. As they approached Lab B, the tension was palpable, each footstep echoing like a countdown to confrontation. Ready? Thalassa asked, her hand hovering over the door control. Zephyr and Barrow nodded, both looking more determined than ever. Let's do this. The door hissed open, revealing a scene that looked more like a horror show than a lab. Equipment lay in shambles, screens cracked and sparking. Amidst the chaos stood one of their own, eyes wild with the manic energy of someone who danced too close to the signal's fire. Dr. Revex, Thalassa greeted, sarcasm dripping like venom. Fancy seeing you here, returned, a crooked grin plastered on her face. Hey guys, what's up? Just redecorating a little. By redecorating, you mean trying to kill us all? Zephyr asked, arms crossed. That's one way to put it, Ree replied, a touch of madness in her voice. The signal, it speaks to me. It's beautiful. Barrow shook his head. Ree, you need help. This isn't you, what do you know? Ree snapped, her defiance as sharp as a blade. You're all blind to it. The signal's a gift. Gift or not, it's turning you into a liability, Thalassa said, trying to remain calm. We need to fix this before it's too late. You can't stop it, Ree insisted, backing away. It's inevitable. Nothing's inevitable, Zephyr countered, stepping forward, except maybe death and taxes. And even taxes are negotiable. Thalassa seized the moment, lunging forward and grabbing Ree's arm. We're taking you back, Ree. You need to be somewhere safe. Ree struggled, but her resistance was more desperation than strength. The signal had taken its toll, and the woman they'd known was buried beneath layers of alien influence. Let go of me, Ree shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. You don't understand. We understand more than you think, Thalassa replied, her grip firm. We're all feeling it, but we can't let it win. With Zephyr and Barrow's help, they managed to lead Ree back to the main lab, her protests growing weaker with each step. All around them, Venus's alien landscape loomed, a reminder of the hostile world they called home. Think she'll be okay? Barrow asked, worry etched in his features. She'll have to be, Thalassa said, guiding Ree to a chair. Once we get this signal under control, we can work on undoing the damage. Assuming there's anything left to salvage, Zephyr added, ever the cynic. Ree sat staring at the floor, her facade of confidence crumbling. What if you're wrong? She whispered, a note of fear in her voice. Then we're all screwed, Thalassa said bluntly, but we're doing our damnedest to make sure that doesn't happen. Zephyr and Barrow resumed their positions at the consoles, a sense of urgency propelling them forward. The alien threat still loomed, and time was their most precious commodity. Back to the grind, Zephyr muttered, cracking his knuckles as he focused on the readouts. Let's see if we can't shake things up a bit more. Thalassa nodded, jumping back into the fray with renewed vigor. The counter-signal was their best shot, and they would use it to its fullest potential. Think the aliens know we're onto them yet? Barrow asked, glancing over at Thalassa. Probably, she replied, not looking up from her work, but let them come. We've got nothing left to lose. The lab buzzed with activity, each keystroke a step closer to either salvation or oblivion. They were fighting a war on two fronts, against the aliens and against their own compromised minds. Any chance we're winning? Zephyr asked, his tone half joking, half hopeful. Depends on your definition of winning, Thalassa said, trying to keep her spirits up. But we're still here. That counts for something. As the Ayers stretched on, they worked tirelessly, their focus unyielding. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and they were determined to tip the scales in humanity's favor. The signal's changing, Barrow announced suddenly, eyes wide with surprise. It's adapting. Great, just what we needed, Zephyr grumbled. An intelligent enemy. We'll just have to be smarter, Thalassa said, her resolve unshakable. And a hell of a lot more stubborn. In the heart of chaos, they stood united, a small band of rebels with nothing left to lose. They were outnumbered, outmatched, but they fought on with the ferocity of cornered animals. Let's show these bastards what we're made of, Thalassa repeated, echoing her earlier sentiment. This time, the words resonated with a deeper meaning, a promise to fight until the bitter end. Together they faced the unknown, a ragtag team caught in the crossfire of a battle that threatened to consume them all. But they were human, and if history had taught them anything, it was that humans never went down without a fight. As the signal surged and shifted, whispering its alien secrets, Thalassa, Zephyr, and Barrow prepared for the next round. Because in the end, victory wasn't always about winning, it was about never giving up. And they had no intention of giving up today. The lab felt like a club for insomniacs and masochists, and Dr. Thalassa Corin was their undisputed queen. She didn't wear a crown, but the permanent crease between her brows might as well have been a diadem. She glared at the holographic readouts with a mix of irritation and resignation, like someone trying to interpret modern art when they'd rather be at home with a stiff drink. "Zephyr, how's it coming along?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. Zephyr Yorin, the engineer who somehow still managed to look smug in a crisis, peered over his console. "Depends on your definition of coming along. If you mean the systems are on the brink of a spectacular meltdown, then we're nailing it." "Great," Thalassa muttered, massaging her temples. "At least we're consistent." Barrow, the lab's designated warrior, squinted at his screen as if hoping the numbers would magically rearrange themselves into something less apocalyptic. "Earth's gone quiet. Last bastions aren't responding. Either the aliens have decided to play nice or we've lost them." "Play nice?" Zephyr scoffed. "More likely they've decided to invite us over for supper. And guess what? We're the main course. Wouldn't mind a decent meal," Thalassa said, her stomach growling in agreement. "Haven't had anything but nutrient paste for days." "Look on the bright side," Zephyr quipped. "It's not like we'll have to worry about our diets much longer." A tense silence settled over the lab, each of them acutely aware of how close they were to total failure. The signal continued to worm its way into their systems, like an invasive species refusing to take a hint. "Any brilliant ideas?" Thalassa asked, not really expecting an answer. Zephyr leaned back, arms crossed, as if contemplating the mysteries of the universe. "We could always try turning it off and on again. Works for everything else." Barrow snorted. "Yeah, and maybe the aliens will get so confused they'll forget what they came here for." "Hey, you laugh, but it's practically a universal solution," Zephyr shot back. "Plus, it's not like we have any better options." The truth was, they were running out of options faster than Earth was running out of cities. The signal was adapting, evolving, and they were stuck with technology that felt like it was powered by rubber bands and goodwill. "Okay, let's focus," Thalassa said, pulling them back into the grim reality. "We need to figure out what the hell that signal's doing to Venus, besides turning the wildlife into something straight out of a horror movie," Barrow asked, his fingers tapping nervously against the console. "Yeah, besides that," Thalassa replied, though considering the current state of affairs, she was half tempted to start a betting pool on which species would mutate next. Her money was on the dragonflies. "Field drones are picking up increased activity," Barrow announced, his voice tinged with unease. "Those dragonflies are getting bolder. Last report showed one of them carting off a field drone. Wonder if it's building a nice little nest with them." Zephyr shook his head. "Next we'll see them forming a dragonfly uprising. All hail the new overlords. At least they couldn't be worse than the aliens," Thalassa mused. "Though bug overlords are a hell of a lot less appealing than I'd like. Maybe they'll inherit the Earth," Zephyr suggested, smirking. "Once the aliens are done with us. Let's not sign over the deed just yet," Thalassa replied. "We've still got some fight left in us." "Fight or stubborn denial," Barrow muttered, but he didn't stop working, fingers flying over the console like a pianist chasing the perfect note. Their systems hiccuped again, the screens flickering in a way that suggested they were either about to find the solution or implode spectacularly. "Think the aliens are watching us right now?" Barrow asked, glancing around as if expecting to find one peering through a window. Zephyr shrugged. "Probably making popcorn and placing bets on how long it'll take us to blow ourselves up." "Let's disappoint them," Thalassa said, her tone a mix of determination and that special brand of optimism only found in truly desperate situations. With each keystroke, they poured everything they had into resolving the crisis. It was a frantic dance, balancing on the edge of a knife with failure and annihilation looming like a pair of unwelcome dinner guests. "Signals getting stronger," Zephyr reported, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. "If we don't find a way to counteract it soon, we might as well start drawing straws for who gets to play sacrificial lamb." "Not it," Thalassa said instantly. "Ditto," Barrow chimed in, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Zephyr chuckled. "Figures I'd be the unlucky bastard." Outside, Venus's acid rain drummed a relentless rhythm, a reminder that even the planet itself seemed determined to make their lives difficult. But compared to an alien invasion, a little weather was the least of their concerns. "Any luck with the countersignal?" Thalassa asked, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd catch a break. Barrow sighed, a sound more weary than hopeful. "Boosted it as much as we can, but it's like trying to shout down a hurricane." Zephyr tapped his console, a frustrated rhythm that mirrored the chaos in his head. You've got to admire the aliens' dedication. They might be trying to kill us, but damn if they're not committed. It's like they took a course in overachieving annihilation, Thalassa said dryly. Most species wouldn't bother with the small details, but not these guys. Well, Zephyr replied with a grim smile, let's show them what human stubbornness can do. Together they pushed forward, each small success a tiny flicker of hope in the encroaching darkness. But they could feel the weight of failure pressing down, like the universe itself had decided to take a personal interest in their defeat. Earth still silent? Thalassa asked, her voice a knife edge of tension. Barrow nodded, his gaze fixed on the readout. Yeah, if anyone's left, they're not talking. Great, just what we needed, Thalassa said, sarcasm her only defense against despair. A silent audience for our final act. Despite the odds, they kept going, refusing to let the weight of the universe crush them. It was a fool's hope, but it was all they had. Think anyone will be around to remember us? Barrow asked, his question half joking but wholly serious. Zephyr smirked. If not, at least we won't have to worry about bad reviews. Thalassa shook her head, trying to ignore the sense of inevitability creeping in. Let's make it a performance worth forgetting. The signal continued to pulse, a relentless tide threatening to swallow them whole. But in the face of obliteration, they stood firm, their resolve as unyielding as the aliens marched toward victory. Whatever happens, Thalassa said, her voice steady despite everything, we gave it our all. All, Zephyr snorted. More like way too much. Barrow grinned, the expression a defiant challenge to the universe. Then let's give them hell. As they fought on, pushing themselves to the limits of endurance and beyond, they clung to the hope that somewhere, somehow, their efforts would make a difference, even if they never lived to see it. In the end, they were human, flawed, irreverent, and stubborn as all hell. And if that wasn't reason enough to keep fighting, they didn't know what was. But for now, they faced the unknown with grit and determination, fighting against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't touch, but could feel pressing down on them with the weight of inevitability. Yet even in the darkest hour, they found strength in each other, in the shared defiance that defined humanity at its best. Whatever comes next, Thalassa said quietly, it's been an honor. Likewise, Zephyr replied, a rare note of sincerity in his voice. Barrow nodded, his hands steady on the console. Let's make sure they never forget us. And with that, they turned their attention back to the task at hand, ready to face whatever came next with the same irreverent courage that had carried them this far. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about fighting, about standing up against the darkness and refusing to back down. And as long as they could still draw breath, they would keep fighting, would keep persisting, until the very end. Thalassa Corin had long ago mastered the art of pretending to listen while her mind was somewhere else entirely. It was a necessary skill when dealing with Barrow's never-ending stream of what-ifs and Zephyr's relentless quips. As the lab's queen of pragmatism, she had the uncanny ability to filter out the noise. But today, as alien doom loomed large, even her ironclad patience was fraying. Maybe we should try reasoning with the dragonflies, Zephyr suggested with a smirk that was entirely too self-satisfied for her liking. Thalassa gave him a look that could have withered a Venusian rainbow vine. Sure, and while we're at it, why don't we ask the acid rain to tone it down a bit? It's been looking a little too enthusiastic lately. Zephyr raised his hands in mock surrender, just trying to lighten the mood. The tension in here could power a star cruiser. Yeah, well, if we don't come up with something soon, we'll be repelling boarded aliens with bad jokes and wishful thinking. Barrow, meanwhile, was engaged in his favorite pastime, staring at the console as though sheer willpower could change the numbers. I wish these numbers would just make sense. It's like they're mocking us. Of course they are, Thalassa replied, not bothering to mask her sarcasm. The universe loves a good laugh at our expense. She returned her attention to the holographic readout, her eyes scanning the chaotic data. A stray signal chirped on the screen, the kind of anomaly that had become all too familiar. But this time, something caught her attention. A pattern, a brief, shimmering glimpse of order amid the chaos. Hold on, she muttered, her fingers dancing across the interface as she magnified the signal. There might be something here. Zephyr leaned over, peering at the screen with interest. If you tell me it's another glitch, I'm going to throw myself into the acid rain. Don't tempt me, Thalassa shot back, eyes glued to the readout. She ran a few quick calculations, her mind a blur of numbers and possibilities. No, this is different. It's coming from the plants, Barrow frowned. The plants, you mean the ones that eat solar flares for breakfast? Exactly. But more specifically, this one's emitting a frequency that's interfering with the alien signal. It's like they're singing a tune the aliens can't stand. Zephyr's eyebrows shot up. You're saying the plants are fighting back. That's some real little shop of Venus stuff. Thalassa shrugged. Desperate times, desperate measures. Nature's throwing everything it's got at the problem. So what do we do with this botanical miracle? Barrow asked, the first glimmer of hope creeping into his voice. We need to harness it, Thalassa replied, pacing the length of the lab. Create a synthetic version of the signal and broadcast it wide. Zephyr scratched his chin, clearly mulling over the logistics. You mean weaponize the plants? I like it. Just one problem. How do we get it off Venus and into the big, bad universe? Zephyr, do you live to find problems with every solution? Thalassa asked, more amused than annoyed. I call it maintaining healthy skepticism, he retorted with a grin. Keeps us alive. Well, Mr. Skeptic, can you rig something up to amplify it? Thalassa asked, turning to face him directly. Zephyr pondered for a moment, the engineer's gleam bright in his eyes. I can rig up a transmitter, but it's gonna be rough. We're talking duct tape and dreams rough. That's our specialty, Barrow chimed in. How much time do you need? Zephyr shrugged, already pulling up schematics on his console. Give me a few hours, maybe more if things start exploding. They always do, Thalassa said with a resigned sigh. Just try not to blow us up before the aliens get a chance. The lab buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose, their looming extinction momentarily forgotten. Thalassa set to work isolating the plant's frequency while Zephyr rummaged through the equipment pile, muttering curses at the outdated tech that was supposed to be their salvation. Barrow, ever the warrior, clung to the hope that this plan was less of a suicide mission than it sounded. You really think the plants could save us? Plants, duct tape, and a hell of a lot of stubbornness, Thalassa replied. That's the human way. Eyes blurred into a feverish rush of activity. Zephyr rigged together a contraption that looked more like a science fair project gone wrong than a piece of advanced technology. Thalassa worked on fine-tuning the signal, her thoughts a whirlwind of calculations, and the occasional prayer to whatever god was listening. Got it, Zephyr exclaimed, holding up a tangled mess of wires and circuits with a triumphant grin. Thalassa eyed the device warily. You sure that's not going to explode? Define explode, Zephyr said deadpan. But if it does, at least we'll go out with a bang. Great, Barrow groaned. Exploding is just what I wanted to cross off my bucket list. With their plan in place, they moved to the next phase, deployment. The idea was simple enough. Send the signal into the cosmos and hope the plant's frequency was as irritating to the aliens as it seemed. As they worked, the weight of what they were attempting settled over them. It wasn't just their lives on the line, it was humanity's. The burden was enough to make Thalassa's hands tremble, but she steeled herself against the doubt. Ready? She asked, standing at the console, feeling like she was about to launch a miracle or a disaster. Ready as we'll ever be, Zephyr said. Let's annoy some aliens. Barrow nodded, his expression a mix of fear and determination. If this works, I'm naming a drink after us. Thalassa couldn't help but smile. The three idiots. Sounds about right. Together they activated the transmitter, the lab filled with the hum of energy and the faint, mocking rhythm of the plant's signal. It pulsed out into the universe, a desperate plea for mercy wrapped in defiance. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Every second felt like a year, each breath a struggle against the suffocating fear of failure. Anything? Thalassa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zephyr and Barrow scanned the readouts, their tension palpable. It's doing something, Zephyr said finally, disbelief edging his words. The alien signal, it's weakening. Barrow whooped, a sound of pure relief. I can't believe it, we're actually doing it. Thalassa's heart soared, the weight on her chest lifting for the first time in what felt like forever. We're not out of the woods yet, she cautioned, though her own voice shook with emotion. True, Zephyr agreed, his grin unrepentant, but I'll take a small victory over none. Let's keep pushing it, Thalassa said, her focus returning with renewed intensity. We've got them on the ropes, time to make them bleed. The signal grew stronger, their newfound weapon a beacon of defiance against the creeping darkness. They worked in unison, a seamless team fueled by desperation and a flicker of hope. Their systems held, though just barely, as if the machinery was as stubborn as its operators. The lab was a cacophony of alarms and alerts, but for the first time they were winning the fight. Earth's responding, Barrow announced, his voice thick with emotion. They're not gone. They're fighting back. Thalassa felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. Let's give them a reason to keep fighting. Zephyr adjusted the transmitter, pushing it to its limits. The alien signal continued to weaken, the universe echoing with the plant's defiant song. We're doing it, Barrow said, his face alight with newfound hope. We're actually doing it. Thalassa allowed herself a small smile, the weight of the universe no longer crushing. Let's finish this. They pushed on, unyielding in the face of annihilation. Together they stood against the darkness, their resolve as fierce as the fire that fueled their fight. As the alien signal continued to falter, Thalassa knew they had turned the tide. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they had given humanity a chance, a fighting chance against the inevitable, and for the first time in a long while it felt like hope. Whatever happens next, Zephyr said, we'll face it together. Idiots to the end. Barrow nodded, his grin infectious. Here's to us, the biggest idiots in the galaxy. Thalassa laughed, a sound that echoed with defiance and joy. Here's to us. As the signal pulsed out into the cosmos, they knew their fight was far from over, but they had something that no alien force could take away: unbreakable hope, and that they realized was more powerful than any weapon. To the idiots, Thalassa said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast. To the idiots, Zephyr and Barrow echoed, their voices strong and sure. Together they faced the unknown with courage and determination, ready for whatever came next. Because in the darkest Ior, humanity's light still burned bright, and that, they knew, made all the difference. The lab felt like the inside of a pressure cooker on a bad day, tension thick as the Venusian acid rain that was probably corroding their external sensors. Thalassa, Barrow, and Zephyr stood clustered around the console as if it were an altar, their makeshift device humming with an ominous energy. If they were praying for a miracle, it was wrapped in duct tape and a healthy serving of sarcasm. "Remind me again why we're trusting a bunch of solar flare-eating plants with the fate of humanity?" Barrow asked, eyes fixed on the holographic readout as if it might bite him. "Because aliens hate the sound of chlorophyll jazz," Zephyr suggested, staring at the wires like they owed him money. "Besides, it's this or wait for them to finish turning Earth into a quaint collection of craters." Thalassa was too busy tapping away at the console to join in their banter, her brow creased in concentration. "Focus, gentlemen. If we're going to piss off an alien race, we need to do it right." Zephyr rolled his eyes, though his hands were steady on the controls. "Imagine that, us needing to do things right for once." He gave the transmitter a final tweak, and the device whirred into life with a noise somewhere between a cat purring and a chainsaw revving. "Here we go. Let's show them what a bunch of angry plants can do." The contraption sent out the signal, a frequency that was pure cacophony to anyone with ears, or whatever alien analogs they used. It pulsed through the lab, then out into space, a digital middle finger wrapped in static. "Now we wait," Barrow said, rubbing his hands as if warming them by a fire. "For either them to go running or for our glorious end." "Comforting," Thalassa muttered, watching the readouts tick by with a tension even she couldn't mask. "How long until we know if it's working?" "It could be seconds," Zephyr replied with a shrug, "or it could be the rest of our natural, albeit short, lives." The seconds stretched into minutes, the air thick with unspoken fears and ill-concealed hopes. Each tick of the clock echoed a reminder of what was at stake, yet the sarcasm flowed freely, a lifeline in a sea of near-suicidal optimism. "Do you think they'll send a thank you note?" Zephyr mused, leaning back with a casualness he didn't feel. "If they do, it'll probably be a planet buster," Thalassa said, scanning the incoming data with the intensity of a hawk eyeing its prey. "But hey, at least we'd get to name it after us," Barrow snorted. "The idiot-class planet buster has a nice ring to it." Their levity was interrupted by a series of frantic beeps from the console. Thalassa's fingers flew over the keys, her eyes widening at the numbers cascading down the screen. "Wait, this can't be right. The alien signal, it's collapsing." Zephyr leaned closer, his previous nonchalance replaced with an electric focus. "You're serious? We're actually annoying them out of existence." "It looks that way," Thalassa replied, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "And Earth's forces are using the distraction to mount an attack." Barrow's face split into a grin so wide it threatened to tear his cheeks apart. "No way, we're actually doing it. We're irritating them into submission." Zephyr chuckled, the sound tinged with relief. "Who knew all you needed to defeat an interstellar invasion was a bunch of pissed-off plants and a killer playlist?" As the signal continued its assault on alien ears, the lab's atmosphere shifted from one of desperate hope to cautious triumph. The aliens' response, visible in the data streams, was one of disarray. Their ships broke formation, their communications faltered, and the united front they'd presented was starting to fray at the edges. "This is big," Thalassa said, her voice hushed with awe and the weight of what they'd achieved. "It's actually working." Zephyr adjusted a few settings, driving the signal harder, the hum of the transmitter almost a battle cry. "Let's keep it up. We need to give Earth all the help we can." Barrow glanced at them both, a newfound determination in his eyes. "It's not just Earth, it's everything, everyone, and we've got to see this through, even if it kills us." Thalassa nodded, the gravity of their situation resonating through her. "Even if it kills us." The data continued to pour in, each blip and wave a testament to their insane plan's success. Earth's forces, bolstered by the chaos they had sown among the aliens, pressed their advantage. Reports of tentative victories trickled through, each one a lifeline to a species on the brink. Zephyr, always quick with a quip, looked at Barrow. "So, when this is over, who's going to be the first to say I told you so?" Barrow smirked, as if we'd ever let you live it down. "But one thing's for sure, we're naming a bar after this." "The idiot's victory," Thalassa suggested, her eyes still glued to the readouts. "Drinks on the house for anyone who helped save our sorry hides." Zephyr laughed, the sound a blend of exhilaration and fatigue. "Sounds perfect. Here's to humanity, too dumb to know when to quit, but somehow making it work." The signal continued its relentless assault, the alien forces buckling under the combined pressure. The lab, once a bastion of last-ditch desperation, now thrummed with an energy that was almost jubilant, the hum of their makeshift transmitter a song of resistance. For once, it seemed, the universe was in their corner, albeit begrudgingly. The alien armada, so vast and unstoppable mere years ago, was crumbling, their plans for conquest unraveling at the seams. Thalassa allowed herself a moment of silence, a private celebration of what they'd managed to achieve. "I never thought I'd be so grateful for plants," she said, wiping a sheen of sweat from her brow. Zephyr raised an imaginary glass. To Venusian flora, the unsung heroes of humanity's last stand, Barrow, not one to be left out of a good toast, chimed in, and to us, the idiots who listened. They shared a laugh, a brief respite in the maelstrom of their lives, but it was a laugh that held more than humor. It carried hope, defiance, and the audacity to fight against the odds. The battle wasn't over, but their part in it was a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity, a testament to their refusal to surrender, even when staring down extinction. As the signal continued to broadcast, the alien forces reeled, their once unbreakable formation shattered by the sheer absurdity of the human counterattack. It was a victory carved out of desperation, but a victory nonetheless. Thalassa, Zephyr, and Barrow stood shoulder to shoulder, comrades in arms against the sprawling chaos of the cosmos, and for a moment in the heart of the tempest, they were unbreakable. "Whatever happens next," Thalassa said, her voice steady and sure, "we'll face it together." Zephyr nodded, his grin as irrepressible as ever. "Idiots to the end," Barrow chuckled, his laughter a balm against the harshness of the universe. "Here's to us, the biggest idiots in the galaxy." They stood together, facing the future with a resolve forged in the fires of their shared struggle, a resolve that would see them through whatever lay ahead, because in the darkest hour, humanity's light still burned bright, and that they knew made all the difference. The lab, finally rid of its pressure cooker atmosphere, was as quiet as an intergalactic graveyard. Dr. Thalassa Corin leaned back in her chair, taking a moment to savor the rare taste of victory. The alien signal was vanquished. Earth's forces were mopping up what remained of the extraterrestrial threat, and the makeshift device, their handcrafted symphony of chaos, was now a silent testament to their ingenuity. "Well," Thalassa said, breaking the silence like a rock through a stained glass window, "I think we can add intergalactic music critics to our resumes." Zephyr Yorin, eternally smug even in triumph, kicked his feet up onto the console, earning a glare from Thalassa that could have etched itself into steel. "Imagine that. We didn't just throw them off. Hell, we made them run like they were late for a galactic sale." Barrow, still rubbing his hands as if trying to dispel the residual tension, chuckled. "And here we thought saving the world would involve more heroics and less jazz." "Yes," Thalassa replied, rubbing the crease between her brows that had become as much a part of her as her DNA. "Turns out the universe hates smooth jams just as much as the rest of us." Outside the lab, Venus continued its usual hellish symphony. Enthusiastic acid rain pounded against the hardened exoglass, while the monstrous dragonflies buzzed lazily through the toxic air. Nature here was a persistent bastard, thriving in places reason suggested it shouldn't. Kind of like humans, Thalassa mused. "So what now?" Zephyr asked, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and uncertainty. "Do we pack up and head home, or do we stick around to see if Venus decides to give us a farewell acid shower?" Thalassa sighed, her fingers brushing against the console like a pianist who'd just finished a particularly demanding concerto. "Earth's got a lot to rebuild." "Guess we're not out of the woods yet." Barrow, his usual skepticism softened by the recent victory, nodded. "Rebuilding sounds like a job for people with way more optimism than us, but I suppose we've earned a break." She glanced at Barrow, her voice tinged with a wry amusement. "You volunteering to start a construction company, only if I can call it the Idiot's Construction. Our slogan can be, we build it, you pray it stays standing." Zephyr laughed, his voice echoing in the now relaxed lab. "I'll drink to that, even if it means our buildings are held together by sheer stubbornness and duct tape." A series of new beeps interrupted their banter, drawing Thalassa's attention back to the console. "Looks like Earth's sending us a thank you note. Or maybe they're just confirming we didn't blow up the wrong aliens. Wouldn't that be a story?" Zephyr quipped, leaning over to peer at the holographic display with a mix of interest and apprehension. "Congrats on saving Earth. By the way, the aliens you annoyed were our last hope against the real threat." Thalassa shook her head, though her lips twitched upwards. "Nothing so dramatic, thankfully, just a report. Our little stunt bought Earth enough time to regroup and push the aliens back out of the solar system." Barrow let out a low whistle. "Guess it really was a do-or-die gig, and for once we didn't die. Not yet anyway," Thalassa said, though the weight of the tension that had gripped her for so long was noticeably lighter. As they sat there, surrounded by the remnants of their desperate ploy, an unexpected tranquility settled over them. It was strange, Thalassa thought, how quickly humans could adapt to chaos, even thrive in it. Maybe it was the thrill of the challenge or the sheer audacity of their survival instincts. Either way, it was damn impressive. Zephyr broke the silence again, his voice carrying an edge of sarcasm laced with genuine curiosity. Think the plants'll miss us when we're gone. After all, they did have to put up with that god-awful music for a while. Barrow shrugged. Depends. Do they have taste, or are they just as stubborn as us? Thalassa chuckled at the thought. If they are anything like us, they'll complain about the noise but secretly love the drama. The comm system crackled to life, a welcome distraction from their musings. It was Earth Command, their overly formal voices a stark contrast to the irreverent crew in the lab. Venus Station, this is Earth Command. Status update requested. Over. Zephyr rolled his eyes, flicking the comm's switch with a lazy flick of his fingers. Earth Command, this is Venus Station. Status is miraculously still alive. Over. The voice on the other end wasn't amused, but the relief was palpable. Acknowledged, Venus Station. We've received your report. Excellent work. Begin preparations for return. Over. Thalassa nodded, her mind already shifting gears from survival mode to logistics. Looks like we're heading home, boys. Time to pack up and leave this lovely acid bath behind. Barrow stood, stretching with a groan that seemed to echo the lab's own sigh of relief. Home sounds nice. Maybe I'll get a chance to sit on something that doesn't try to dissolve me. Or eat you, Zephyr added, eyeing a particularly large dragonfly flitting past the window with a grin. Thalassa watched them prepare, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd turned a hopeless situation into a genuine win. Sure, there was a lot of cleaning up to do back on Earth, but they'd bought humanity a fighting chance. In the end, wasn't that what they always did? Stumble through the dark until they found a way to light a match. As they wrapped up, the air in the lab was thick with the smell of burnt circuits and stale sweat, a reminder of the battle they'd fought. But now that smell carried a note of victory, however fleeting. All right, let's get this show on the road, Thalassa said, injecting some energy into her tired voice. We've got a planet to get back to. Zephyr and Barrow nodded, their faces set with determination and just a hint of relief. They had a long journey ahead, but for once it was one they could look forward to. As they left the lab behind, its makeshift device still humming with residual energy, Thalassa couldn't help but glance back one last time. For better or worse, they'd made their mark here. Outside, the Venusian landscape seemed almost serene, the acid rain a familiar drumming on the reinforced hulls of their ship. The dragonflies, undisturbed by the recent chaos, continued their lazy circuits through the air, as if celebrating their own survival alongside humanity's triumph, and perhaps in a way they were. Life, after all, had a remarkable tendency to endure. As they boarded their ship, Thalassa felt a strange sense of peace. The universe was still a vast, chaotic place, filled with more threats than she could count. But for now, they'd proved that even the smallest, most underestimated force could make a difference. All right, you two, she said, settling into the pilot's seat with a familiar ease. Let's head home. Zephyr and Barrow took their seats, a comfortable silence settling among them as the ship powered up. The stars lay ahead, a brilliant tapestry of unknowns, but also of possibilities. To the idiots, Barrow said, breaking the silence with a grin. To the idiots, Thalassa and Zephyr echoed, their voices steady and sure. As the ship lifted off, the lab behind them becoming a speck in the sprawling Venusian landscape, Thalassa allowed herself one last glance at the planet they'd called home for so long. In the end, humanity's light still burned bright, refusing to be snuffed out. And that, she realized with a small smile, made all the difference.